Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Summer of Sport. This is a BookTube event sprawling across the whole of the summer, created by Mark at Book Time with Elvis to address the fact that although sports writing, fiction and nonfiction, is very popular with the reading audience, it doesn't get talked about a lot. At least in our little corner of BookTube, it doesn't. So for the Summer of Sport, if you read a book that is connected with sports, somehow, any sport, somehow, is that the backdrop? Is it the main focus? Is it a history? Is it a romance? Then you've participated in Summer of Sport. I am one of the co-hosts, and I've been having a ball, but I've also been a little bit casual about Summer of Sport because I have all the time in the world. If I add a sports book to my reading every night, I've got all summer long to cover any kind of ground, to deal with any kind of theme that I want, which means that these opening days, this first week of Summer of Sport, I've been letting the algorithm push me around. I've been letting it take me where it will, which is fine. That's usually fine. I'm an open-minded reader, and I've got a block of reading time at night, so I chose my first Summer of Sport book, Mr. Hockey. A hockey romance between a button-down librarian and a super hot hockey star. They meet cute, they get together, and sparks fly. Okay, fine. And the algorithm must have noticed that I not only read that book, but finished it. I read the whole thing. I am sure that reading stats and completion data on an e-reader, I am positive that that is being harvested by other entities. If my e-reader is connected to Wi-Fi, and it is, then that data is being harvested. All your data is being harvested and used. I'm sure that in addition to all the other uses, I haven't yet got any pushed ads for jock straps or hockey sticks, but I'm sure it's coming. I'm sure that in addition to all the other uses for that data, one is just to inform the algorithm. If these eyeballs, it's not a person for data harvesters, it's just an eyeballs. If these eyeballs read this thing, maybe they'll read something like it. So I got recommended another hockey romance, only this was a gay hockey romance, two young gay men. And I read it, and I thought it had a lot of potential, a lot of substance that could have been better used by the author if the author had been bearing down and had made a decision at the very least not to use any cliched language. Although if you took the cliches out of Blades of Desire, there would be literally random adjectives and a couple of conjunctions here and there, but otherwise, no, there'd be nothing left. But it had issues in it. It had serious issues. And that, the algorithm I was locked in by now, so it fed me another gay hockey romance that was called Dark Tide, or The Reckoning, or The More Things Change, or Playing for Keeps, or Breaking the Rules. I don't remember. It had not only a cliche for a title, but a cliche that has been used in the title of literally 200 books. So I don't bother to try to remember the titles of, the Rising Tide or anything like that. I don't bother to try to remember them. I want to stress to anyone in the writing world, the indie world, the mainstream world, the publishing world, the editing world, that my titling services are free and they're at your disposal 24 hours a day. There is never any reason to give a book a cliche for a title. There's never any reason to do that. But I read whatever it was. I was mainly thumbs upping the cover model, and I read that one, and it also was, yes, it was a gay hockey romance, but it had issues. It had serious dark currents underneath the surface. There was a book there. It wasn't just a romance. There was a book there. And by this point, two gay hockey romances in a row that I not only read but finished, actually highlighted in them, the data harvesters are going to know, all right, well, we're locked in here. We know what to recommend to this person. So I got recommended another gay hockey romance. This one. Carly Marie's Traded, which is it's a gay hockey romance involving the Nashville Grizzlies. That's the name of the team, an NHL team named the Nashville Grizzlies. This stars a player named Trevor, who is short. He's barely over 5 feet tall, but he's really talented, I guess. He's really talented as a player. I don't see that happening, but okay. And there's an older man named Brax in this story who knew Trevor once upon a time a decade ago and there was an electricity of connection that neither one of them really did anything with, and that Trevor didn't even acknowledge. And the teaser material for this book said that Trevor has a secret that he's desperate to hide. And when he gets traded and suddenly comes in the orbit of Brax again, he is desperate to hide his secret. And I read the synopsis of the plot, and I thought, okay, well, his secret is that he's gay. Hockey is intensely misogynistic. I mean, it is intensely misogynistic. It's also intensely homophobic, even though we're talking about 8% of the adult population. Maybe a little less, not anymore. So despite the fact that your middle school child reports that in 2018 there were 3 gay kids in her class, and in 2024 all of them are reporting to be gay. All of them, 100% of them. That is obviously false. There is obviously a huge amount of social contagion going on here. It is about 8% of any animal population, maybe less, not anymore. I know that is not true in Hollywood, that is not true in the American comic book industry, that is not true in the American publishing industry, but it is nevertheless true in reality. Nevertheless, I figured that's Trevor's secret, is that he's gay in the NHL and he doesn't want anybody to know that. And that maybe he's extra cautious about that around Brax because he remembers their earlier encounter and thinks, if anybody's going to guess, if anybody's going to put 2 and 2 together here, it's going to be Brax. But no, there's something else going on in this book, and this is the risk I run by letting the algorithm zero in on me as a customer for gay hockey romance. Gay romance actually of any kind in the indie world. Because there are a whole bunch of, I don't know how to put this delicately. And I shouldn't need to worry about putting it delicately, because the only reason to put it delicately would be to preserve my standing as an ally. And I'm not. I'm not trying to preserve my standing as an ally. I do not care what 12 psychos on Twitter think of me. And you shouldn't either. I absolutely do not care what the ideological, blue-haired, zealot fascists in our society that we've allowed to govern so many aspects of our society, I absolutely do not care what they think of me. Especially since they have long since unhooked the mooring lines from their boat and drifted away from reality. This book is not about the key secret at the heart of this book. It's not that one character is secretly attracted to men or even secretly attracted to one particular man. There's a different thing going on here, and like so many other psychological problems in the 21st century, it has been rebranded a proud, float-worthy identity. A psychological problem is not an identity. It's a problem. It's something you should get fixed. Of course, I am perfectly aware that less than 100 years ago, being attracted to a man was called in many respectable circles a psychological problem that you needed to get fixed. But we know biologically that that's not true. We know, not just in humans, but in all kinds of animals, we know that's not true. But if you are claiming as an identity something that is a psychological problem only, so it doesn't have any biological element, it doesn't have any deterministic element, it's just psychological, all these unfinished sentences, because I don't know how to talk about this book. Because Trevor's secret is not that he's attracted to men, or that he's even attracted to Brax. His secret is actually hinted at on this cover. Because that widow teddy bear is not a symbol of the Nashville Grizzlies. It is, but it is also a signal to a subgroup of readers of gay fiction. I would assume, a very small subgroup that has mistaken a psychological problem for a personal identity. And those are littles. Trevor's secret is not that he's gay, it's that he's a little. Meaning, he's just a widow boy. He doesn't want to meet a romantic partner or even a sex partner. He wants a father. He wants a daddy. Someone who will spank him when he's naughty. Someone who will put him on an allowance. Someone who will treat him as a child. And Brax is just the man for the job. He's just the daddy for the job. And in this book, they circle all around whether or not that's true. I imagine it takes a huge amount of circling to know whether or not you've actually met someone who has a matching psychological problem to your own. That must be pretty difficult. I imagine that well, I don't imagine anymore. I now know serial killers also have a huge trouble finding their Renfields, finding someone who has a psychological deficiency, but it's not their psychological deficiency. It matches theirs. It complements theirs. Of course, there's no serial killing here. I'm not equating the two. I'm just saying if you are an adult, it is obviously a psychological problem rather than a personal identity or a sexual identity that you want someone to treat you like you're a little kid. That is not healthy. That is obviously not healthy. Being a whittle and secretly wanting someone to be your daddy when you're a grown man is not healthy. That is obviously psychologically unhealthy. The fact that it's mixed up with sex just makes it more complicated here. So I get my point. I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, so to speak. But my point here is that I wasn't 50 pages into this book. Maybe, all right, Carly Marie is actually a very spirited writer, a very energetic writer. It's a very energetic reading experience. So maybe 70 pages. Maybe 70 pages into this book before I realized that this is not being written for me. I don't like to say that because I'm sure that I'm not sure. I don't know anything about Carly Marie, but it's Carl Marie. It's possible that Carly Marie would say, no, it isn't written for you. And maybe even be proud of that fact. And, okay, it's the indie world. Maybe you've isolated an audience, a reading audience, that is keeping your light bills paid and that knows what it wants. And you know what they want, and you're willing to write it. You're certainly writing it with a lot of energy. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's all legitimate. I'd like to think not. I just, maybe it's parochial on my part, no pun intended, but no uppercase or lowercase p. Maybe it's parochial on my part, but I think if you're writing a book like that, you have failed as a writer in some fundamental way. You have lapsed into just pure fan service. I could be wrong about that. But by page 70, the latest in this book, I realized this is kink lit for a kink I don't have. This is psychological literature for a psychology that I don't have. And that I also don't think is healthy. Obviously, if you are entering into a personal, let alone a sexual relationship in which, to say the very least, there is a gigantic power dichotomy. To say the very least, that is true here. A little cannot decide where you're going to go on vacation. A little cannot decide that this month they want to pay a separate bill of their own. A little cannot make any decisions at all. That's the whole dynamic here, is that a little cannot decide where you're going to live, what city you're going to move to, when you're going to go out for groceries, what you're going to eat. What child decides those things? None do. I realized fairly early on in this book, that there's something going on in this book. It is increasingly openly discussed, and it's discussed as something that's, just natural. This is admittedly not a heavily populated aspect of being gay, but still nothing wrong with it. It's nothing. Once you acknowledge it in yourself, it's not that you go to a therapist; it's that you go hunting for a daddy. I don't agree with that. There's no possibility that I ever will agree with that. That is not the same thing as, alienists or mesmerists 100 years ago saying that gay men were like that being gay was like that. That's not the same thing at all. That has nothing to do with... that is not reflected anywhere else in the animal kingdom. That is not reflected anywhere else. That is clearly a psychological thing. And a psychological imbalance, something that ought to be addressed in therapy rather than in the bedroom. And there's no hint of that in this book. There's obviously that I'm so worlds apart from the assumptions of this book that after a while that became just unavoidable, just completely unavoidable. So I hate to say it for a reading event, I sort of petered off. By the time I got halfway through the book, Carly Marie made me want to know what was going to happen to these characters, especially Trevor. Trevor's really well done in this book. I wanted to know, what becomes of him. Just on surely a what happens next plot level, I wanted to know what happened to him, but I kind of petered out in the book because I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that the happy ending here was going to be that he gets nappies and a bedtime. That's not a happy ending at all. That's not a happy ending at all. Imagine a World War I novel where you, being a shattered hulk of your former self who drinks fruit juice in a cup and sits in a wheelchair all day until you die of old age from shell shock. Imagine if in World War I fiction that was the accepted outcome. That was what you wanted. So I'm fighting here in the Somme salient because I'm really hoping that I will end up a completely enfeebled, shell-shocked shell of my former self. Imagine if that was the ending that you was hoped for. You would look at that and think, ugh, no. I was reading this and I was aware of the fact that the happy ending, the only happy ending for this book, was going to be one that wasn't going to be happy to me. It's going to leave me just... I think I may have drifted off before I got to the ending of this book. And now I need to address the problem. Now I need to address the grizzly in the room. Now I need to push back against the algorithm. I hate to do it. The algorithm's the best friend I've ever had. It's the best friend that any of us has ever had. What friend of yours has ever tried to get to know you as well as the algorithm has? God bless it. But I'm going to have to push back because I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. I do not want ever in my life to read another little daddy book. I don't want... If this exists, if this subculture exists out there, if this is the way you react to the fact that plenty of people will discriminate against you in society, that you're not completely accepted in society, you're closer than you ever have been. For now, and that's not going to stay true. In 5 years, it's going to be illegal. In 5 years, the Supreme Court's decision on legalizing gay marriage is going to be overturned. 5 years at the most. So you're never going to have it any better than you do now. But I understand there is still a lot of prejudice against gay people, against young Trevor, the young Trevors out there, the 18-year-old Trevors out there, NHL hopefuls. Plenty of them live in households where if they walked down to the living room and told their parents that they were gay, their father would throw them out of the house. Not metaphorically. You can't sleep in your old bedroom, you can't have any of your old stuff anymore, and you're never getting any more money. We'll see how you survive on the sidewalk. I know that that's true. This is not a universally accepted identity. It's not a universally accepted reality. And if there are subgroups, I know there are, of course, because I've been to Provincetown. If there are subgroups out there that are reacting to the pressure of that psychological ostracism, by warping it in ways like this, I just want to be a little boy. I want a daddy. I want somebody to take care of me. Okay, if they're out there, okay. And if people can be happy in those, what I consider to be warped reactions to social pressure, okay, fine. Certainly, we don't lack for what I consider to be psychologically warped reactions to social pressure. Drag shows, for instance, would be an incredibly prominent example. But we don't lack for any of those, and that is not how people who are not in psychologically pressured subgroups act. Sorry if that's bland. Sorry if that's Gen Z conformity. That I am not saying that the white picket fence and the mowing of the lawn and the 2.5 children is the only way to be normal. I am not saying that. But abnormality is still easy to spot, I think. It's not harming anyone. This book, there's no harming. There are even stakes in this book. The novel does work up some stakes. There's a particular teammate in this book that creates drama. Not the gay kind of drama, but actual drama. Oh god. Well, anyway, you see my problem here. Is that this just, to put it benignly, to put it in the most anodyne way possible, this is just not for me at all. So I'm going to have to push back against the algorithm. I haven't actually checked to see what all my new recommendations are, but I think I'm going to leave not only gay hockey, but hockey, just in general. I know I'm in New England, so hockey seems like such a natural choice, but I'm going to leave hockey just in general. I'm going to go to a completely different sport, I think. I'm not an expert on the literature of sports, fiction or nonfiction. I've been flattered by a lot of you emailing me, asking me for starter kits, fiction and nonfiction on sports, but I'm not an expert on this. I'm not a sporty person. That's why I was so attracted to Summer of Sport as an event. So I'm going to jump far afield. I don't know what I'll do, but I'm going to do something for my next report because the algorithm thinks that I like gay hockey romance just a little too much. So that is my report for today. Traded. I'm sorry that my scouting report was a little vague this time around, but there are all kinds of ins and outs of this subject that just aren't suitable for an all time zones channel. So this was not a reading success for me. I think the author has talent, but this was as close to reading a book in a language I do not read as I've gotten in quite some time. All the priorities, all the hopes, and all the ideas of what constitutes a happy ending, totally foreign. So I'm going to, as it were, back out of this, and we will see if I can do any better next time. I will report back. Thank you, BookTube.